We have a bunch of panelists on the screen. If you guys all want to turn on your cameras so we can see your faces. We have Brady, who is our UDOT project manager, Naomi. We also have Mitch Shaw from UDOT Communications, as well as some of our consultant team, Randy Park, who is our project manager, Jack Allen, who can answer any environmental questions, Greg Sanchez, who can address any traffic questions, and then Mike King on the design side, and then myself and Scott Henderson will kind of facilitate this Q&A. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them into that chat. Okay, gonna stop sharing my screen and we'll kind of jump into the first couple questions. I guess I'll go for it. Tamara Campbell asks, will there be noise walls added to the interchange? Brady, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. So I'll actually pass this one over to probably Naomi or Justin if you guys want to talk about how we make that decision on whether we have noise walls or not.
Sure, I'll take a crack at it. So we will look at whether or not noise walls will be built as part of this project. This project is a type of project that UDOT considers for noise walls, and we have a noise policy. We'll evaluate whether or not building noise walls is warranted based on that policy, which looks at things like the existing noise level, what the future noise levels would be like. And then once we do that evaluation, we also basically ballot. The neighborhood gets to vote on whether or not they would like the noise wall if it qualifies based on kind of how loud it is. And as a result of that process, we would determine whether or not noise walls were warranted. UDOT's noise policy is posted to our website. If you'd like more details, you can take a look at that.
I also want to add in that we will have some additional information about noise when we actually do have an interchange design, when we do have the release of that EA like we talked about in the spring. So we will have some more information about potential noise impacts then, and we'll kind of explain the process as well for everyone. Great.
Thank you, Naomi. Looks like we have a second question here also from Tamara Campbell on when will the interchange be constructed. So we'll kick that to you, Brady, and see if you'd like to redirect that or handle that one yourself.
Sure, I can take a stab at this one, I think. So a lot of it depends on how our process goes as far as the environmental requirements and what the design ends up looking like. But initially, our high-level schedule right now, Tamara, we're hoping to get through the environmental process and finalize our design to where we can actually advertise the project to contractors for bid. The earliest I could see that happening would be the end of 2023, first part of 2024, which would mean the soonest we would construct, I would say, is the summer of 24. And there's probably a decent chance that could even delay somewhat and go into the following year, the summer of 25. That's my best shot at it at this point.
Okay, thank you. And it looks as though Duke Richardson might have a comment on that as well.
Oh, Duke's just kind of responded, clearing that one out. Okay. We'll go to the next one then, which I see is from Gary Bigham. What businesses are going to be impacted? Brady, you want to start with that, and then maybe we can bring Mike into that as well on the design
side? Sure. So, Gary, a lot of it depends on what our actual interchange design ends up looking like with our preferred alternative. We're very early in the process, and to be specific on which businesses will be impacted is very hard to say right now. There definitely could be a couple that are impacted right there off of the new alignment of Midland Drive, but at this point, we're still gathering that information. And as we have that information, we'll be reaching out to the businesses through our public involvement team to make them aware.
All right. This is a great question from Opal Elaine. What do you do with our comments? We'll toss that to you, Brady.
I think I'll let Laura answer that, or somebody else that might know better than myself.
Yeah, I'll start, and then I'll probably pass this to Naomi or Jack for kind of what we do during the scoping phase. So we will take all of the comments that come in during this formal comment period. Our team will read through all of them, kind of analyze them, see kind of what you guys, what you like out there, what you don't like out there, any suggestions that come in. We will use that as we start to look at developing kind of the purpose and need for the project, as well as those alternatives. Jack or Naomi, do you want to kind of talk about that from the, I guess, NEPA environmental perspective?
Sure, I'll give it a shot, and Naomi, you can correct me once. So the scoping comments of this phase of the process and the input that you're giving, even though we can't give you a lot of information back because we're learning more and more about the project, your input is very, very important. And the reason it's very, very important is because it informs the scope of what we will analyze. The participants on the call, you live there, you work there, you drive through there. I mean, it's part of who you are. And so you know this area well. And that knowledge parted to us helps us to provide you with a better study. Naomi, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
I think that was great, Jack. I think just for folks who haven't experienced an environmental assessment process before, you might hear us toss around the term purpose and need of the project. And when we talk about that, that's what Jack is talking about when he says the scope. Essentially, it's a statement of why we need to do what we want to do and why. And your comments help us develop that, which then drives all the solutions that we develop. So what we do with your comments is we use your comments to help us develop that purpose and need statement, which essentially determines the parameters of the solutions that we develop. And that's why your engagement right now is so important.
Perfect. I also just want to throw out, like we talked about, this is the formal comment period from today until July 31st. Just kind of want to reiterate that we will take your questions and comments at any time throughout the study. So you're welcome to reach out to us at any time as well. Another question I'll throw out here from Nathan Turner. Are you considering a separated parallel mixed use path on 24th? As a bike commuter, 31st Street should not have painted bike lanes. The road is designed to move cars quickly and is not safe at all for cyclists. A separate protected mixed-use path on 24th, not a painted bike gutter, would be best. And I'm going to just quickly pull up kind of the active transportation map as well. But Brady, if you want to start with this, I'll pull up that AT map that we have.
Okay. I'll start out quickly, and then maybe Mike King, if you want to add anything, you can. So we do work pretty closely with our local governments when we're looking at our active transportation and bike movements. And so we'll be working closely with Ogden City. I know that in the past they have expressed a desire for a multi-use path that's not in the roadway. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
No, well, I think you basically said it. I think working with the city, we want to help them with their plan, with their pedestrian access. And I think we could look at a combination of things, of the off-road path, plus maybe a combination of wider shoulders for some cyclists that do still like to ride in the road. So I think there's a variety of solutions that we'll be looking at.
Yeah, and it may, Nathan, it may end up something like you're saying where there is room for those cyclists, but maybe those lanes aren't painted or striped as bike lanes. So we'll definitely be looking closely at that.
Okay, and I just want to kind of reiterate what Brady said when he was kind of presenting on this active transportation slide that I have up right now. These are the planned facilities that are shown on kind of those existing AT plans, both Ogden City as well as WFRC. So none of this is necessarily set in stone. This is just kind of, we use this as our starting point for looking at active transportation facilities on this corridor.
Okay, and Nathan has another question here. This study area seems pretty small. Why are you not considering bottlenecking effects closer to Ogden, especially the 24th Street Bridge? Well, let's begin with Brady Roberts, and then you can kick that to anyone else that you'd like to as well, Brady.
All right. So it is interesting, Nathan, with the way that UDOT funds the projects and how that all happens. It's not 100% clear in my mind. What I do know is that we've been funded for the interchange piece itself, as well as the realignment of Midland Drive. And I do know that the 24th Street structure is on the long range plan as well. I just don't know exactly what year we're looking at replacing that bridge structure. Also, I'll just add that I know Ogden City, they're the ones that are really pushing. They like this project. They see 24th Street as kind of the gateway to Ogden. And so unfortunately, our project wasn't funded for that piece, but it is on the long range plan. I just don't know what year they're looking at replacing that bridge structure.
Great. I think kind of covered that one. Next question comes from Robert Bomber. Have you looked at rerouting the railroad tracks for easier traffic flow for cars and bikes on 2050? And what, if any, plans do you have for using 2050 in your plan? You can kind of pull up a map. I'm going to pull up a map very quickly and just kind of show that study area. We'll kind of show everyone the area that he's looking at. So I think Robert, and if I'm reading this incorrectly, feel free to submit another question in the Q&A to kind of correct us, but we're kind of looking at right here. Have you looked at rerouting the railroad tracks for easier traffic flow for cars and bikes on 2550? And what, if any, plans do you have for using 2550 in your plan? Brady, kind of go to you and then maybe Mike after that.
Yeah, I think I'll let Mike take a stab at this one.
Thanks, Brady. We have been working with the railroad up to this point, and we'll continue to work with them as we advance the study and look at solutions. And we recognize the challenge there at 2550 and the conflict with the railroad. And we're looking at some options to hopefully maybe reduce some of that impact. I guess that's probably the best way to answer that.
Anyone else want to answer that one? We're good. Okay. Move on to
we just don't have a lot of detail there. We have that on our radar, but there have been some challenges in the past with trying to move track, and so we're gonna do what we can to make the area more efficient.
Great.
All right. Thanks. Looks like we have one here at the top from Gary Bigham. What does it mean if my business is affected by this? Let me start off with you again on this one, Brady.
Sure. I'm not sure that we have any of our right-of-way folks on the call tonight. Do we, Laura?
We do not. We will kind of have them available at that next public meeting when we do have some better ideas of those right-of-way impacts.
Okay. So basically, Gary, if the preferred design ends up affecting your business, we will have some communication with you to get details as far as your business and your operations. And we will look to accommodate your business if there's any way, shape, or form that we can. If If that's something that is not possible, then you end up in the right-of-way acquisition process with the department. And there's a lot of things that go into that process that I don't know all the details of, but there's just and fair compensation. We help relocate the business and minimize any impacts to you and your business.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Brady. Just kind of like he said, we're at the early stages right now, so we unfortunately don't have any information to share about the design or what those impacts are, but we will have that at our next public meeting. And for any of those properties in that area, we will kind of be reaching out to you individually if needed. Great. Gonna go to one from Elena Faye. Sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly, but you said there's a traffic problem. What exactly are you seeing? Brady, do you want to start with that, or maybe kind of can pass it to Greg after that?
Sure. So initially the obvious problem at 24th and I-15 is that it's currently a half interchange. So it excludes that movement to get on northbound as well as to exit southbound. And there are a lot of industrial businesses in the area that use trucking, things like that. So that's one of the obvious problems, as well as you look into the future and the traffic volumes for later years clear out to 2050. You start to see some other problems within 24th and Midland Drive as well. So I don't know if Greg on? Does he want to add anything to that?
Greg is on. Greg, do you want to chime in at all?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Brady. And I think on top of that, this is a very industrial area, right? So there's a lot of heavy moving vehicles that compound the traffic issue. So you see queuing, like Brady said, on Midland. We've observed queuing on 24th Street. And with all these driveways and all these commuters mixing, in industrial and the commuters mixing together, there's a lot of congestion that may be alleviated by making this interchange a full access and providing more connectivity regionally.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. We have another question here from Nathan Turner. Will you be surveying bike commuters or pedestrians in the area to get input on what they would like to see? Many do not attend these meetings, but could provide valuable input. Ogden did that with its BRT system, and it was fruitful. Let's see. Brady, do you want to start us off again on that?
Sure. So typically on any project, especially something of this size, we like to engage the community. And that's part of why this environmental assessment is to get your input at this time. And we're gathering these comments and we take note of them with our design, as well as working with the local cities and to get their input as well prior to making any decisions. But active transportation is something that is more and more important to the department. With all of the growth taking place in the state, it continues to be something that is important that we take that into consideration with our roadway designs. Not sure if somebody has anything else to add to that.
Jack, I don't know if you maybe have anything you want to add from kind of how the environmental process with NEPA looks at active transportation. It's okay if you don't.
I'm sorry, was that me or Naomi that you?
For you or Naomi, just kind of how either of you, from the environmental perspective, how do we look at active transportation on these projects?
Well, I'll let Naomi answer if she would like, to answer the question about integrating active transportation into the project.
Sure. So there's no specific part of an environmental assessment or NEPA that says you have to look at active transportation. But our goal of this project, and Brady kind of talked about it, is to provide improvements that meet the needs of all users. And so that's a big part of the reason why we're having this scoping period right now. We're having the in-person meeting tomorrow. The 30-day comment period is we want to get feedback from all users in the communities, people who drive, people who bike, people who walk. And so even if folks don't come to the meeting tonight or the night tomorrow night, we have 30 days to submit those comments to help inform the scope, the purpose, and need. There's materials, kind of informational materials to help inform their comments and give them an idea of what we want to hear about on the website. And we really want to hear from all users, active transportation users and others. And so I would just encourage anyone who wanted to be heard to make sure that they take advantage of this comment period and do that.
Mm-hmm. If I may just say, if, Nathan, if there are specific groups of individuals that you strongly feel can provide insights to the development of the project, please, reach out to any one of us with the names of those groups, and that will help. But as I said Naomi, I gave away my Boston background. Naomi pointed out, there's from the environmental assessment process, the outreach that we're doing now, and then the outreach that we're doing in 2023 is what, is the extent or obligation that we have in terms of interacting and engaging in a meaningful process. Beyond that, we would urge you to reach out to those folks and reach out to us directly with those names, and then we can take that on.
Yeah, and once again, the best way to do that during this comment period is those ways that we covered early on. And if you go to the project website, those will be available after this meeting or tomorrow, where you can see the different ways to do the formal commenting.
Perfect. And I'll just kind of flash those there again. Like I said earlier, this full presentation is available right now on the website, as well as all this information. So just kind of again to recap before we go into the next question, we will have that meeting tomorrow at Ogden Union Station. Email is here, website is here, along with kind of where you can mail a hard copy comment if you want. So I'll show these again once more before we're done with the presentation also. Okay, perfect. I'm going to go to the next question, which is from Jeff Green. What about the design we saw before? So I'm going to assume this is referring to kind of the design that Mike's team was working on. Brady, do you want to start this? We can kind of pass that off to Mike and Jack potentially.
Sure. So we have been trying to work through what was considered our preferred alternative, Jeff, and we ran into some roadblocks along the way. And basically we got to a point where we just weren't progressing the design. And so we were asked to take another high level look as the department to go back and look at other designs that might be feasible or more feasible in this area. And that's what's got us back to where we are right now with looking at a new design in the area. Mike has a little more history with the project than I do. If you have anything you want to add, Mike?
Well, I think at this point, probably not. I mean, I think previously you made it clear that the project is the interchange and then the new realignment of Midland Drive down to 1900 West, and that the scope of the project is still essentially the same. It's just we're taking that step back to relook at the interchange alternatives and find something that's going to work with the community.
Okay, thank you. We have a question here at the top from Diana L. Are you also reaching with Spanish material? Ogden has a high percentage of Spanish speakers. And we could probably hear from Brady on that. And I don't know if with Santiago. Yeah, Santiago's here as well. So why don't we start off with Brady?
Sure. Yeah, we understand that need, and that's what we plan for with a lot of the material that we're putting together that'll go out to residents and folks that live in the area, is to include Spanish translated material, just so everybody's aware of exactly what's going on. Do you want to jump in a little bit more on that, Santiago?
Yeah, like we mentioned before, a Spanish version of this presentation will be available on the website. And also, there will be materials tomorrow in Spanish at our in-person presentation. Anything you would like to add, Laura?
Yeah, I'm going to quickly jump in right here. Thanks for that response. I'm just pulling up the website really quickly just so I can kind of show everyone. Give me 1 second. So if you do have, Spanish-speaking friends, neighbors, people in the community, please encourage them to, go to the website. All of the content on there is in Spanish and English, as well as this presentation. So I will kind of share that right now. Give me 1 second. So for this project, all of the information that we'll be posting will be in both Spanish and English. And if you scroll down to the bottom of this page, you'll kind of see the presentation that we gave tonight. There is a Spanish version as well. So it is an exact duplicate of what you saw tonight. So that is available on the website for them to take a look at. We have Santiago on tonight, but we'll also have some Spanish speakers tomorrow night. If people want to come in and talk with our project team, that will be available. We also have reached out to a lot of the community organizations in this area to try to best understand how to reach that Spanish-speaking community, knowing that, like Diane said, that there is a large Spanish-speaking population out there. But if any of you have, ways that you think that we can do better with that outreach, in addition to just kind of providing those materials. The advertisements were all in Spanish and English, but we would love your feedback on if there's groups or people or ways we can do that better. Please send us a comment. We'd love to hear that feedback. Anyone else want to jump in or? Okay. All right, I'll go to the next question. We have another one from Nathan Turner. Is there a possibility of eminent domain land acquisition being used on homeowners on 24th Street due to this project? Brady, toss that one.
Sure. I'll jump in. Let's also just take note, Laura, that in our next public meeting, not the one tomorrow, but when we have more detail, let's make sure our right-of-way leads here to help with some of these. But to answer your question, Nathan, there is that possibility, yes, depending on our design and what that ends up looking like. Obviously, the department tries to minimize those impacts as much as possible. But there is a possibility that there could be some properties that are affected by the new interchange design, and if they are affected, they end up going through the right-of-way acquisition process. We can get more detail on that to you as well.
And just kind of want to jump in also, if you do have a specific question about that, or do you want us to put you in contact with a right-of-way agent, like Brady said, we don't know any impacts at this point in the study, but happy to facilitate that conversation with right-of-way if you want to understand what that process is.
Yeah, I did want to chime in too, and Brady mentioned this. Eminent domain is always a possibility, but it's one that UDOT rarely utilizes, because we're usually able to find really favorable terms or acceptable terms, at least to property owners and businesses, where that's essentially we don't want to go there, and we rarely have to, and that would be our goal with this process.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
All right. We have a question here from Penny Lee. I am not an engineer. What type of input are you looking for from me? That is a great question, because that's kind of the goal of our whole process here, is to gather input. And so, Brady, do you want to begin and then pass it on to anyone else that would like to comment as well?
Sure. So even though you yeah, you're not an engineer. You obviously probably live in the area, and you may even travel that roadway more frequently than the rest of us. And you could provide any type of input that you see on the roadway that is some type of an inefficiency or some improvement that maybe we could incorporate into the project. We've already talked about active transportation and bicycles. That's another piece of it. But say you see some type of a safety issue that you've experienced on the roadway, could be anything like that you could provide input to the project team, and we can make sure that that's something that we address in our design.
If I may build off of that, Brady, if you don't mind, this is Jack. You know, one of the reasons why your input is so important is that, yes, this is the project itself is a design engineering exercise, but in the environmental assessment process, the goal is for people like Brady and others making the decision about ultimately what gets built in that location requires Brady and others to have a lot of information about the project. And it's not just how is the project designed, but it's really as much as to how will the project be a part of that community, how will it work in the community, and how will it affect the surrounding area and the people who live and work there. So the decision making it's a comprehensive decision making exercise that's beyond just the nuts and bolts of the project itself.
Great. I'm going to jump to the next question from Robert Bomber. Do you have any preliminary drawings of what you're thinking as far as realigning Midland Drive, etc.? Brady, and then maybe over to Mike after that.
So we do have some preliminary work that we've done on the project, but we're at this point basically taking a fresh look. And all options right now are on the table. And so there's I would say there's really not anything out there right now that would be worth sharing just because it's speculative at this point. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a good way to state it.
And I want to also add, going back to that schedule that we showed you earlier, we're kind of looking at spring for when we're potentially going to publish that EA, where we will have kind of those answers as far as what all of this looks like from a design perspective. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I may, to Brady's point, which I think is I agree is a fantastic point, but for some people that may feel like a hesitancy to share information, and I can assure you that that's not the case. Oftentimes, I think we've all experienced this where we beg somebody to give us some information, and so we do, but it's really too premature. But that's the information that sticks in our head. And so we live with that through the rest of the process. And we want to avoid that. We don't want you to have predetermined ideas about what is the ultimate action that will be taken out there. You'll all be brought along in the process, and you'll have the opportunities to see that information and react to it. But Brady's absolutely right. We do have some ideas about what could be built there, but it's just not ready to be shared.
Yeah.
Laura, I lost my spot for a moment. Can you?
Totally fine. Not a problem. Question kind of coming in from Erica Dial. Is this interchange 100% happening? What does a no build mean? Brady, do you want to kind of talk about if this interchange is 100% happening?
I'll punt that to Naomi.
Have Naomi jump in then.
Yeah, so the no build is essentially a requirement of the NEPA process, which says that you have to compare essentially the effects or what would happen if you did nothing versus what would happen if you propose, if you do what you're proposing to do. And essentially, there are impacts and benefits associated with each one. Like there are impacts from doing something, but there's also impacts of not doing anything. And so what we're doing is trying to look at those two scenarios and make a choice about which is the better solution, doing nothing or doing what we propose. It doesn't happen often, but we do sometimes choose to do nothing, which is the no build. But again, it doesn't happen often, but it is a possibility. I know that's a little bit vague, but I don't know if Jag wants to follow up a bit. But there are times when we enter into this process and we realize that maybe it's not the right time to move forward with making a decision, and that maybe we want to come back and revisit it in the future. And so that's a scenario where the no build could potentially be.
I think we may have lost Naomi.
Did she freeze on us?
Naomi, yeah. Jack, do you want to jump in with anything to finish that, or?
Naomi's absolutely right.
Okay, perfect. She'll be happy you said that when she's able to rewatch it later.
Yeah, and the only reason she wanted me to weigh in was just that I, have been involved in projects where the no build was ultimately selected, so I can be a witness firsthand that the decision is not made, and there is future decisions that have to be made about ultimately what will or will not be done in the area.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right, thank you for that. We have a question here from Joseph Oak. If noise walls are added, what do they look like? Brady will, as the project manager, we'll toss that to you again, and then you can redirect if you want.
So they look similar to other noise walls that you've seen along I-15. Some of our requirements and standards and our aesthetics may be slightly different, but they'll be similar type of a wall as that you see driving along I-15 if that ends up being warranted or required through the study. Mike, you might have more info on noise walls. Anything to add?
Well, a lot of times it's a project by project aesthetic standards that may play into what those look like. So really it's hard to say at this point.
Yeah. If I just may add, from a dimensional standpoint, they need to be of the certain. When you look at noise walls along the highway corridors, they all have similar types of dimensions and sizes, and that has to do with the science of noise to make sure that the barriers are effectively mitigating as they're supposed to. So in terms of vertical positioning and heights and so forth, they're going to have those similar dimensions. But as Mike pointed out, and as Brady pointed out, the aesthetics tend to be local to the area in which the project sits.
Great. We're going to go to Emily's question. Emily Hokinson, how long do you think the project construction of this project will take? Brady, do you want to jump in on this one?
I would be taking a stab at this. I think that this could be done in one season, meaning sometime between May and October. but that might be a little bit of a push. Mike, do you remember initially what we were looking at on construction durations for this?
Yeah, I think originally we were looking at about 2 seasons, and it kind of depends on when it goes to advertisement and construction starts. So it's hard to say when the project starts and the timing in the year because of paving, windows, et cetera, that could force it to go into a second season.
Yeah, I would think the majority of the work could be done in one season if we got started early spring, and then there might be a few smaller carryover pieces, maybe a riding surface, something like that carries over to the following season. That's best guess right now, Emily.
Brady, if I just add that, the department always look for ways to accelerate construction. It might be accelerated a bridge, move a bridge from build off site, moved into place, or slid into place. So those are all things that the project team will look at to eliminate impacts to the traveling public. That's first and foremost importance during any construction project, that it's done quickly and safely. And so those things will all be evaluated.
All right, thank you. Robert says, if we don't know what you are thinking, how can we give real input? So I think that goes back to what we talked about earlier as to what the purpose of this meeting is and why we're doing the scoping right now. So we can maybe review those points again. What is the types of input that we're looking for right now, and how is that helpful to us? And we'll go ahead and let you take a first shot at that, Brady, and I'm sure there'll be several people with comments on that.
Yeah, so we're early on, Robert, and so we're just getting your initial input now. You'll have additional opportunities to comment on the actual design when that gets refined. It sounds like that meeting will take place spring of 23. But this meeting is more just preliminary, letting you know that there is a project coming, get you start thinking about that. And if you are aware of anything at this point, then that might be beneficial to know, then we're open to that right now.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brady. Have a couple more questions. We'll try to get 3 more, so we're going to try to get through these before 7. Next one comes again from Nathan Turner asking, are you considering the effects of induced growth and how they would likely increase car traffic and possibly travel time? Brady, do you want to start there, and then maybe Naomi or Jack wants to chime in on that?
I was going to see if Greg wanted to talk about the demand.
Yeah, I can talk about that. It's something that we take into account when we forecast future traffic, right? The design is meant to last until 30 years in the future. So we make sure that we capture as much of the future growth that we can. And our models do take into account increase in travel time and delay and traffic and the changes in traffic patterns. And those are all metrics that we will use when we analyze these alternatives to make sure that we are in fact benefiting the area and adversely in other areas.
Yeah, and if I may add to what Greg is speaking to, in the environmental assessment process, the work that Greg is doing and what he's talking about is what is used to support adequate design over the long term to make sure that this facility, if and when it's constructed, operates at a satisfactory level for the period that it's designed for. The other part of induced demand and induced growth falls within the impact analysis of the document. So once the design is flushed out for the purposes of analyzing its impacts on the surrounding area, one of the things we do look at is how would these improvements somehow facilitate induced or unplanned growth in demand, which would lead to further demand beyond what the model had predicted as part of that analysis. And that analysis results will be available in the EA when it's published in 2023.
Thank you, Jack. We have a question here from Sandy D. What is the city's involvement in this? Brady, you want to lead out on that?
Sure. Yeah, the city's heavily involved. We've been working with the folks over to Ogden, and they're very engaged in the project. They'll be involved with the design and have input along the entire way of the project. And so I just say they're highly involved.
All right. Thank you. Laura, you're up. There you go.
Thanks. There we go. Say that. Go ahead.
I don't know if we have just a couple of minutes if this closes right at 7, Laura,
we can keep going.
I was just going to circle back to the question about the rail realignment as far as what we were doing on 2550 in our previous design. I think we answered that question, but we answered it pretty vaguely, and I think it can provide some benefit as to how we ended up where we are today.
Go ahead.
If Mike, I don't know if you want to take a minute and address that a little bit more specifically as to some of the challenges that we've had with trying to realign the rail with our prior design.
Yeah, without going into a 4-hour presentation, yes, we spent probably several years working with the railroad, trying to come up with solutions that would work with them. And we came up with some good ideas. And I think we got to a point, though, where it was creating other challenges on the project. And so the challenges just kept building up to a point where it was going to, I think in our eyes, was going to risk the project being able to move forward, which kind of put us in the position of having to take a step back and look at everything again. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it does. It just got to a point that for the department, we could have got to the very end of our design and really still, if there would have been anything that would have been a little bit off or the railroad was not content with, we just wouldn't have been able to build anything. And so that's why we're at where we are today with the project and looking at the redesign.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Brady and Mike, for that context. I'm going to just we have one last question. So I know we're at 7, but we're going to throw one last question out and then we'll wrap up the presentation. And this comes from Jay Anderson. For the businesses that will remain during construction, what will the road access look like for them getting to and from work? Specifically the roads of 2550 and Pennsylvania Avenue. Brady, you want to start with that one?
Sure. So specifically exactly what it looks like is to be determined. But what I can say is that we will maintain access, and roadway users will still be able to use the roads during construction. It'll be phased in a way that we build sections of the road at a time, typically one half and then the other, sometimes even 3 phased. We work around business to make sure that we maintain access so that their needs are still met during construction.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, that takes us to just barely after 7 o'clock. So we're gonna wrap up this presentation. I'm gonna share my screen. really quickly, once again, just to kind of remind you guys that we do have an in-person meeting tomorrow night. It will be the same content that you saw here tonight, but if you do want to, again, give a formal comment on a hard copy comment form, or everyone you see on the call tonight will be there as well tomorrow if you do want to talk to our project team or ask us any questions in person. We will be at Ogden Union Station from 5:30 to 8 tomorrow night. It's just going to be right in the main entrance of the building. There'll be directional signs to kind of point you to where to go. And then I just wanted to flash this up here. I know we've kind of showed it a few times, but this is that project website. Like I said, all of this information is on that website. Copies of this presentation are on there as well, along with a comment form for you to provide any formal comments. That is the email to reach our project team, as along with the hotline number right there. If you want to call and ask any questions, that hotline rings right to Scott, who was on the meeting tonight. So feel free to reach out to us at any time throughout the study. And thank you all for coming tonight. And we hope to see any of you who want to come tomorrow in person at Union Station at 5:30 to 8. So with that, we'll say thank you for attending. We'll have a good night.